it's Matt, and today I will be reading to you one of my nonsensical stories. Now, I think some of you may remember that I have done a couple of nonsensical stories in the past, and they are basically just stories that I sat down and wrote with the intention of improvising everything as I went along, and purposely trying to make very little sense. So this and those other stories are probably pretty difficult to follow or make much sense of, but as a result, I think that makes them more fun and funny, while also more easy to fall asleep to, because with so much nonsense going on, it's easy to get lost in the words and just kind of doze off, I guess. At least that is my goal with these stories. But anyway, this is my third nonsensical story, the other two being The Jolly Old Pretzel Chef and Jason's Bad Day at Starbucks. So I hope you enjoy Sir Jubilee McCoughs-A-Lot and the USS Baja Blast. Here we go. Did you just bake all of my beans? All of them? Yes. But why? Because they deserved it. Yeah? Well, guess what you deserve? What? This. Bobby pushed the big red button, ejecting his cousin Norman from the USS Baja Blast and into the staggering void of outer space. Next to the big red button was a post-it note. This post-it note read, "For use only during a bean emergency." And this certainly was a bean emergency if Bobby had ever seen one. He couldn't believe it. Why would Norman even think about baking Bobby's beans? What could the beans have done to deserve such a fate? As these beans were not sentient, unlike the universally famous buggy beans from the planet of Heck, there was no sin they could have committed even if they wanted to, and they didn't, because they were non-sentient beings. Bobby spent the entirety of his winter break aboard the USS Baja Blast pondering such questions. He lamented the baking of his beans during artificial snowball fights with crewmates, agonized over his cousin's betrayal during both Christmas 2.0 and 3.1, and routinely wondered if he'd ever be able to enjoy unbaked beans again. He wouldn't, but as they say, ignorance is bliss, and after a few short weeks, Bobby had forgotten that his beans, or his cousin, had ever existed. And so the USS Baja Blast continued onward, searching the furthest reaches of deep space for the ultimate chocolate chip cookie recipe. Back on Earth, life was good for Michelle. You may be thinking to yourself that by the end of this story, Bobby and Michelle will become lovers. This couldn't be further from the truth. Bobby and Michelle have never met, and never will meet. In fact, Michelle's side of this story occurred several hundred years prior to the construction of the USS Baja Blast, and has absolutely nothing to do with Bobby's side of this story. But the two sides of this story are just as important for reasons I'm simply too lazy to explain. So please, allow me to continue. Michelle had just purchased a scratcher at her local 7-Eleven, and upon gently scratching away its upper layer with a 23-year-old penny, had become the lucky winner of another scratcher. So she walked right back to the cashier to redeem her prize. But not all was as she expected. The cashier who she'd purchased the scratcher from was nowhere to be found, despite selling it to her with a jolly smile only 83 seconds earlier. Instead, the role of cashier was now filled by none other than Sir Jubilee McCoughs-A-Lot, the beloved bear mascot of a local pizza parlor owned by the reanimated corpse of Abraham Lincoln. Ironically, Sir Jubilee McCoughs-A-Lot had never coughed. He had never coughed in any animated portrayals of his character, and no one wearing his costume for promotional events had ever coughed while in disguise. But that all changed on this fateful day. Today, on the 14th of April, 2039, Sir Jubilee McCoughs-A-Lot coughed for the very first time. No one knows if the cough came from the person disguised as him, or if the cough came from the supposedly inanimate suit itself. But what matters is that this cough broke the very fabric of reality. The moment the cough hit Michelle's ears, she was whisked away, pulled through 17 trillion parallel universes, and deposited at the very beginning of time itself. And it was here that she found something remarkable. Anyway, back to Bobby. Having just finished his 8th consecutive viewing of the Coconut Corn Calamity, his least favorite film of all time, Bobby was in a great mood. His outlook on life had never been brighter, and so, with great jubilance, Bobby logged on to America Online and went to check his email. "You've got mail," announced the narrator of America Online in a familiar, neutral tone that was perhaps not fitting for the piece of email that Bobby was about to open. A piece of email that would change his life forever. This piece of email was an advertisement from none other than Chicken World, the top-rated theme park in the galaxy for more than 18 millennia. Despite the theme park's prestige and popularity, this advertisement was Bobby's first time hearing of its existence. And upon learning that the new Egg ride had just opened, Bobby knew he needed to go. Right now. "Egg," Bobby yelped in a voice not unlike the mating call of an elderly dolphin. "I must experience Egg." Bobby sprinted through the halls of the USS Baja Blast, screeching the word "egg" repeatedly to all who would listen. None of them knew what he was talking about in their minds, but they fully understood in their hearts. Every single crew member aboard the USS Baja Blast immediately aborted their years-long mission to acquire the ultimate chocolate chip cookie recipe, deleting all records of the mission's existence from the ship's computers, and burning all related drawings of chocolate chip cookies in a massive bonfire that completely destroyed Wing C's women's restroom facility. One chocolate chip cookie drawing remained, of course. The one depicting an anthropomorphic chocolate chip cookie sailing the Indian Ocean, dressed as a pirate with a lit cigar in each of its 5 hands. Once all evidence of their original mission's existence had been destroyed, the crew of the USS Baja Blast reprogrammed the ship's trajectory and began the 48-year pilgrimage to wonderful, beautiful, entirely underwhelming Chicken World. Back at the beginning of time, Michelle could not believe what she was seeing. She stood in an endless black void, utterly alone, aside from the creature situated directly in front of her. This creature was not, as you might be expecting, Sir Jubilee McCoughs-A-Lot. It was not the missing cashier either. It was not anyone that Michelle had ever met, nor was it God himself. Instead, the creature that stood in front of Michelle was a man. This man, whose very presence shook Michelle to her core, was surrounded by a bright green aura and bore an expression of rage upon his face as he bit into the ear of a 3DO Free Space Pro microphone. Over his right hand was a novelty horse mask. Near him hovered a large red arrow and the letters OMG, highlighting his foul mood and his manic act of mastication as if the man himself were a living YouTube thumbnail. This man's name was Big Cleat. "You won't believe this," shouted Big Cleat, in a tone that somehow conveyed that he believed he was truly alone, yet fully expected a massive crowd to swarm upon him within seconds. "Breaking news! 99.9% of doctors hate these top 10 weird tricks," he shouted a moment later. His attention-grabbing proclamations echoed off the formless, invisible surfaces of the void surrounding them, as he continued to shout with the conviction of someone whose life depends on grabbing the attention of as many people as possible. Big Cleat's tortured utterances pulled on Michelle's heartstrings in very much the same way a poorly raised ferret might pull on a tablecloth, yanking thousands of dollars of expensive china onto a perilously hard floor, shattering them into countless pieces simply for the fun of it. Truly, ferrets are the most despicable creatures in this universe, and each one should be arrested twice. Only 17 seconds into Big Cleat's proclamation demonstration, Michelle decided it was time to make a contact. "Hello," she attempted to say, before she was cut off halfway through the word by a startled yelp from Big Cleat, so loud it triggered the Big Bang itself. "Why would you say that?" Big Cleat would shout if he was not dissolved into fractions of atoms in an instant. But he was, and so he was gone forever. But not Michelle. As it turns out, Michelle had turned on an invincibility cheat by accident, by stepping on the necessary series of keys on the invisible keyboard she had landed on upon her arrival at the beginning of time. This invisible keyboard allowed users complete control of the makeup of reality, and was accessible by anyone who happened to visit the void. Michelle had unwittingly used it to prevent herself from being obliterated by the Big Bang she had indirectly, inadvertently triggered. Big Cleat had primarily used it to surreptitiously program hilarious design flaws into the human species that his neighbor God would invent millions of years later. His favorite was the thing that happens when you notice the weight of your tongue. Back on the USS Baja Blast, Bobby was getting bored. Very bored. 4 seconds into his 48-year voyage to Chicken World, Bobby decided the trip was no longer worth it. "Cancel the trip," Bobby commanded. "No," said each of his crew members in unison. "Okay," Bobby replied. And so the trip was not cancelled. To Chicken World they continued to fly through the deepest reaches of outer space, past spiraling galaxies of every color and size, and almost into the side of the universe's first space KFC. Thankfully, the collision was avoided, but I know what some of you are thinking, that this story is secretly sponsored by Yum Brands. It's oddly suspicious how I've mentioned both KFC and Baja Blast, a Taco Bell exclusive beverage. Both fast food franchises are owned by Yum Brands, and there's no reason I'd bring both up if I was not being paid by Yum Brands, correct? Incorrect. If I were being paid by Yum Brands, I would have mentioned Pizza Hut as well. Wait, pretend I didn't say Pizza Hut. Look, if you want proof that I'm not being paid, all I have to do is say Domino's. Would I bring up both Pizza Hut and their competitor Domino's in the same story if I was being paid by the parent company of either? No, I would not. And I am not being paid by Yum Brands. Anyway, the journey to Chicken World was filled with drama, adventure, and lots of board games. During the course of the years-long trip, Bobby got married twice and divorced thrice, took a virtual reality walk from Kansas City to Mount Everest and back, remotely exorcised over 500 ghosts from a haunted hotel using vacuum drones, reinvented the internet for fun, cracked his knuckles only once, ported Sekiro Shadows Die Twice to the Sega Genesis, cooked way too much pasta, broke an entire IKEA's worth of glassware despite his great-grandmother, learned how to speak Mandarin in reverse and only reverse, screamed the word vinegar louder than any being in the history of the universe, constructed complimentary couches out of styrofoam for every person aboard the ship, sued Nickelodeon for stealing the idea for SpongeBob SquarePants from his uncle's neighbor, trained all 32 dogs aboard the ship to sing Africa by Toto in perfect unison, died and visited hell for the free tacos and returned without a scratch, trained pizza to be aggressive, created a YouTube channel flipping through years of phone books for each county in America in 10,000 frames per second slow motion, disproved the existence of bananas, induced sentience in 3 of the ship's toilets, said every word in this sentence in the same order up until the word right after this one, in his sleep purely by accident, wiggled around, ate a large bag of peanuts, 2 tins of caviar, a half-eaten cheeseburger from Shake Shack, 12 bananas, a freeze-dried cheese omelet, a chocolate chip muffin, a blueberry muffin, a bran muffin, a banana nut muffin, 2 dozen Krispy Kreme donuts, 7 heads of lettuce, every flavor of smoothie offered at Jamba Juice, a box of fruit roll-ups, a slightly larger box of fruit by the foot, a significantly smaller box of fruit-flavored gummies, cheese, crackers, 9 servings of chicken piccata, 1 miniature corn on the cob, some s'mores-flavored Pop-Tarts, the ingredients required to make actual s'mores for a family of 5, a medium pizza from Little Caesars, a medium pizza from Pizza Hut, a medium pizza from Domino's, a medium pizza from Papa John's, an extra large frozen DiGiorno pizza, 2 apples, 6 brownies, a jar of chocolate chip cookie dough, a handful of McDonald's fries, and a Pringle, and finally played a total of 0 board games. But eventually, the USS Baja Blast and all 9,001 of its crew members arrived at the glorious, incredible, terrible Chicken World. Back at that point in time, that wasn't quite the beginning of time, but not long after the Big Bang, Michelle was experiencing sensory overload. Surrounding her were colors of every shade and intensity, whirling around her as if she were caught in a never-ending tidal wave, with a different, totally unique color for each droplet of water. Pummeling her nostrils were scents and odors of every kind, ranging from the fragrance of Funyuns to the smell of asphalt after the first rain in many months. The nerves embedded in her skin told her brain that she was simultaneously being caressed by the softest needles in the universe and stabbed by the sharpest blanket ever knitted. And perhaps most jarring to Michelle was what she was hearing. Nothing but a whispered reading of the lyrics of the chorus to Scatman John's worldwide hit, Scatman, Ski-ba-bop-ba-dop-pop, performed at an awkward and inconsistent pace. It sounded exactly like this. That really sucked, Michelle thought to herself, and she was not wrong, but she needed to keep herself focused on the only thing that mattered, getting out of this place and getting that free scratcher she so rightfully deserved. Jubilee, she yelled with the righteous fury of a midnight Walmart shopper prevented from using a detergent coupon that expired 30 seconds earlier. And with that one yell, everything changed. But first, let's get back to Chicken World, or what was left of it. If you recall, the USS Baja Blast took 48 years to reach Chicken World. In stark contrast, Chicken World took about 48 days to file for bankruptcy and was promptly closed forever when Bobby's journey was less than 1% complete. Chicken World had even sent Bobby an email notifying him of this drastic turn of events, but he'd forgotten his America Online password after burning the one piece of paper he'd written it down on, the piece of paper on which he'd drawn a chocolate chip cookie purchasing an electric toothbrush for his son for Christmas. Bobby was utterly devastated. The rest of his crew, however, was relieved. And so, with their decades-long plan completely ruined, all but one of the USS Baja Blast's inhabitants returned to the ship and departed for the furthest reaches of space once again, patiently awaiting their next mission. The one inhabitant who remained on the planet that once was home to Chicken World decided to sit down in the spot where it once existed, focus really hard, and try to transform herself into a perfect recreation of Chicken World. She did not succeed. And finally, we return to Michelle, who found herself in a situation not unlike the one she was in at the beginning of this story. As it turns out, the moment she yelled Jubilee, she was mysteriously returned to what seemed to be the time from which she came. She was standing inside a 7-Eleven, a winning scratcher in her hand, with Sir Jubilee McCoughs-A-Lot working the cash register. Dumbfounded by this turn of events, Michelle could only stare straight ahead at Sir Jubilee McCoughs-A-Lot, who immediately took offense to this. "Don't you know that staring is rude?" Sir Jubilee inquired. "How dare you?" The once jolly bear mascot could not take another second of this affront to good manners. Before Michelle could even look away, he jumped over the counter, grabbed a large Slurpee cup, and filled it with nacho cheese from the free nacho cheese dispenser. "This is what you get when you mess with Sir Jubilee McCoughs-A-Lot," he shouted, before chugging the entire cup and storming out of the store, humming Smash Mouth's hit single All-Star all the while. Sir Jubilee was somehow under the impression that this act of cheese-guzzling, song-humming outrage would be sufficient punishment for Michelle's incredible defiance of social norms. He could not have been more wrong. In fact, this scenario was exactly what Michelle had dreamed of experiencing ever since her childhood. Deciding that she could not have been more pleased, she forgot all about the free scratcher she was owed, got back into her Pontiac Aztec, and drove off into the desert sunset, never to get caught in the middle of the Big Bang again. The end. I do hope you enjoyed that very nonsensical story on some level or another. And I hope you're feeling a bit more relaxed or sleepy right now. But I would like to thank you all for listening. And I will see you next time. Have a good night.